All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to Writing Your Best Resume and Cover Letter. My name is Natasha Jones, and I'm the Life and Work Advisor at the Patty Disney Center for Life and Work. And I'm very excited to be here and to talk with you all. Just some kind of house rules. I'll be pausing in the middle of the presentation for questions after I cover everything about resumes. So if you have a question that comes up while I'm talking about resumes, you can put it in the chat or you can just hold on to it, and I will be pausing in the middle to ask for questions. And then at the end as well. So I wanted to give an overview of what I'll be talking about today. Firstly, just for those who haven't met us yet or interacted with us that much, I'm going to be talking a bit about the Center for Life and Work and who we are and what we do. Then I'll be talking a little bit about creative and traditional resumes and kind of just set up the main differences. Then I'll talk a little bit about the real world context, quote unquote, and like who receives applications, who reads your resume. And then I'll be going into a lot of detail about resume formatting guidelines and sections, and then going through the same information for cover letters. So our team is made up of three of us. Bailey, our director, these are the topics that we meet with students about. So she meets with students often about Fulbright, generally entrepreneurship, usually travel grants and fellowships, although that's kind of been paused for right now, and grad school as well. So if you wanted to talk about any of those things, Bailey would be a great person to talk to. We also have Zarina, who is our assistant director, and a lot of her student meetings are around internships, both kind of about searching and finding them, but largely about how you can get them to count for academic credit and all of the paperwork and formal things that go into that. And then myself, Natasha, I'm the Life and Work Advisor, and I mostly do one-on-one meetings with students about a lot of different topics, including professional package or your application materials like a resume, CV, cover letter, portfolio. And the reason there's a little asterisk by portfolio is just because I myself am not coming from an arts background. So if you have very specific like portfolio questions, like is this piece in particular like good for this type of position? I'm not really the best person to ask those questions. Those are definitely better for your faculty, mentor, anyone in your industry. But I definitely have helped a lot of students with just kind of like general organization of portfolios, seeing if everything works, talking about how things flow, if they look good generally. I can definitely help you with that. I also can meet about interview preparation or mock interviews, which is when you have an interview coming up and you want to practice and like run through like a fake interview kind of. I can set that up with you and create questions and ask you them, and we'll go through the whole practice interview, and then I'll give you feedback on how you did. I also meet about job and internship searching generally, and then other things like LinkedIn, networking, or really any other kind of like career topics you can think of, we can have a conversation about. And I wanted to show you where you can find some of our resources online. If you haven't visited our Center for Life and Work website through the CalArts website, you can get there just from calarts.edu, and then the Life at CalArts tab, we're the Center for Life and Work right under that. And especially with our, all of those tabs like under the Center for Life and Work have different information. And the job search support tab is especially useful. We have a lot of different handouts and things on there with things about like guidelines for resumes, cover letters, how to write an artist statement or bio. There's a lot there. And also on that job search support page, we have a bunch of links to external job boards. So pretty much all like creative industry, well, not all of them, but a large number of creative industry job boards we've linked on our site there to just add to how you're searching for things, in addition to the more common like LinkedIn or Indeed or Glassdoor. These are some creative industry specific job boards that are there. And before we jump into more of the content really for the presentation, I just wanted to give a little kind of disclaimer or like heads up that resumes can look very, very different we can see this third resume, the one farthest up the right, that's a performance resume. And I just wanted to say that I won't really be talking about that at all throughout this presentation, because it is a very specific format, and it's kind of relatively easy to like find an example and just apply the same format to your information. So I just wanted to say I won't be talking about that in this presentation, but definitely if you are a performing artist, you still might want to have a more traditional resume if you're applying to things that aren't performance focused. So with these other two resumes, the kind of more traditional, like Times New Roman type one, and also this colorful one in the middle, these are the type I'll be talking more about because they're very similar in the terms of content, and like the type of information and how you write about it on the documents is very similar. They just, of course, look different. The middle one has, of course, more color, more design incorporated, but it does really share pretty much the same content as you would put in the more standard or traditional resume. And I just wanted to say that going forward, I will be showing a lot of examples of different sections in resumes, but they're all going to be from more of like the traditional standard format. But that doesn't mean that the information isn't useful, even if you want to put it in a more like creative and colorful format. The information and like what you write and what you want to include is still going to be the same. So just wanted to kind of set the stage that I'll pretty much from here on out only really be referring to like the traditional style of resume, but the content can still be applied even to more colorful creative resumes. So jumping in, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the real world context, or where your resumes and cover letters and applications go when you submit them. And this can vary definitely like company to company and industry to industry, but usually when you submit an application for a job to a company, that application goes to HR and or human resources. And just keep in mind that when you're creating your documents, like think of them, that the people that are going to be receiving it, and know that they often receive hundreds of resumes for only one open position. So they really are in that kind of like initial reviewing of resumes. They're looking often for reasons to put resumes in the no pile, so they don't have to look at them again, and they can really quickly lessen the pool of resumes that they have to look at. So that's just to warn you that it's very important to have very clear and consistent formatting, and that your document is very easy to read and read quickly. And like should be look very nice so that it avoids being put in that no pile. And I just also wanted to let you know that a lot of companies, especially larger ones, most large companies, because they have a lot of positions to fill usually and are receiving a lot more applications to fill those positions, a lot of them use ATS, or an applicant tracking system, which is a software that you submit your documents to, and then it just like scans through and is looking for certain words that match their job description, or looking for some certain like feature or phrases. So it's very important that when you are applying to a position that you like very deeply study the job description, and wherever you can kind of use similar words from that in your own documents, just to make sure that it's that they're really speaking to each other. Your resume is speaking to the job description, and you have a higher likelihood of getting through the ATS and then making it to an actual person who can review your documents. So this is another reason that you ideally want to tailor each resume to the positions that you're applying to, because they may be using kind of like different keywords that they're looking for. So just really keep looking at that job description when you make a resume or cover letter. I just wanted to throw out a little statistic. So the stat is that recruiters take about 6 seconds to decide if they want to learn more about an applicant or not when they're looking at their resume. So again, this is just another reason to have very consistent and clear formatting. And then also to include the most relevant information to whatever you're applying to at the top of your resume. I mean, of course, you're always going to have your header, like your name and contact information first, but then after that, you'll want to think about what either like your education or certain experiences is most relevant to what you're applying to. and kind of like list it in the order of importance or relevance to really catch their attention. And then of course, like if they see something they like, they will spend more than 6 seconds looking at your resume, but in just that first initial pass, it is very quick. So just wanted to kind of give you all of that context so that when you are sitting down crafting resumes and cover letters, that you kind of have this mindset going in and can know to think about it. So now we're going to jump into actually talking about resumes in a lot of detail. So resume, very simply, is a marketing tool. It's how you're showcasing yourself on paper to a potential employer. We may not like to really think about it this way, but you are kind of trying to sell yourself, make yourself seem as qualified of an applicant as you can, enough to get you invited to an interview. So for everything that a resume does and kind of how important it is, it still isn't the thing that will get you a job. The resume and cover letter are just tools to get you to that interview. You just need to be kind of like interesting enough to an employer that they want to invite you to learn more about you. So now we're going to get into tips for writing your best resume. So your best resume is going to be concise, intentional, and honest. It, again, should be tailored as much as possible to each new position, and it should be consistent throughout in terms of formatting, and I'll get into that more soon. So formatting, these are not like absolute like hard rules. Pretty much everything I'm saying in this is just kind of some guidelines and suggestions of things that might work well. But of course, if you feel that you can present yourself in a slightly different way, that's totally fine. And it's kind of on a case-to-case basis, but these are just some helpful guidelines for when you're starting. So you want to try to stick to like an 11 to 12 size font, just so it's very easy to read. And a font style also that's easy to read. So the like Times New Roman, Arial, those very standard ones are always a safe bet. Your margins, you'll want to be about 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Of course, using the standard 8.5 by 11 computer paper. And be sure that you have your current contact information at the top of the document. And that within each section, so like the different sections, for example, in this resume, the education, work experience, extracurricular activities, within each section, the experiences, or excuse me, the entries will be reverse chronological. So that means that the most recent thing is first, and then it gets older and older and older as you go down. And when you're describing your experiences, you want to make sure that you're using the correct verb tense. So if it's a position you're still in, we're using present tense verbs. If it's a past position, past tense verb. And again, just remember to arrange the whole document in the order of importance or relevance so that you're kind of catching the attention of people that are looking through it quickly. And then some general don'ts or things to avoid and not do in a resume. So you don't want to use I statements or really any full sentences when you describe your experiences. The bullet points start with a verb. You don't want to have your street address. This used to be a very common and standard practice that you would put your address in the contact information, but we don't need that anymore. It can be a potential safety concern, especially if you're submitting applications online. You don't always know where they're going to end up. So you don't want to risk anything about that. And we also don't really mail anything anymore, so unnecessary. But you can keep your city and state if you'd like to. You also don't want to have photos of yourself on your resume and no references either. If an application asks for references, you'll include that on a separate sheet of paper. You don't want to use slang or contractions or acronyms without first spelling them out. This is a fairly formal document. You don't want to include personal information around protected identities like your age, citizenship, marital status, and again, no inconsistencies in terms of things like dates. So however you choose to write months, be it like in words, abbreviated or not, or like the numbered months, any of those is fine. Just make sure that you're using the same style throughout the document. You also want to be consistent in how you're placing information. So for your experiences, if you're saying like your job title and the company, make sure that, and either of those can be mentioned first, just make sure that you're writing it again in the same way throughout. Also, in terms of what type of information you're choosing to bold, capitalize, or italicize, should be consistent again, and verb tense as well. So that's past or present tense. Okay, so now I just wanted to give an overview of some sections that you might include in a resume. Well, a few that are mandatory and then some that are optional. So the ones that you absolutely have to have on your resume is your header, which is going to be, again, your name and contact information, your education, and some sort of experience. And it doesn't have to be in that, well, it will always be header first, but in terms of education and experience, depending on the position you're applying to, you may choose to list your education first, or you may choose to list your education at the bottom. Both are fine, and again, it just depends kind of position to position. Some other sections that are pretty common, but are just, they're not mandatory, but you might want to include them, could be skills or affiliations or memberships, honors and awards, and even course projects. If you don't yet have a lot of formal work experience in your field, you still have experience in your field based on what you've been doing in classes. So now I'm going to go into each of these sections pretty in detail and talk about a little more about what you might want to include in them, and then also how to format them. So for the header, this is hopefully the easiest section on your resume. You're going to have your name, usually bolded and at a larger size than the rest of the document, just so it's very visible. And again, this section is very concise, very short, should be clearly formatted, easy to read through. If you have a personalized LinkedIn URL or a website, you can definitely include that here. And again, just no street address. And when you, with the email that you have that you list, make sure it's professional, usually a combination of your first and last name and numbers or something like that. Definitely your alum.calarts.edu email is a good one. And for the phone number that you list, just make sure that it has a voicemail box set up, and also that the voicemail box is not full, which may not be information that you know, so definitely check on that. Because you don't want to potentially risk the employer trying to contact you and then they can't leave a message, you can't answer your phone, it just could be a bad situation. So just make sure that your voicemail box is set up and that it is not full. And then education. So some kind of guidelines for your education section is that you don't want to have acronyms without first spelling the whole thing out. So have the formal title of your institution, and then you can put CalArts in parentheses so that later in the document you can just say CalArts instead of having to write California Institute of the Arts every time. You'll also want to list the complete formal title of your degree. And if it's like a shorter title, feel free, you can write like Bachelor of Fine Arts out or Master of Fine Arts out. But if it's like your degree has a long title and it like doesn't look as good when you write the whole thing out, you can just do BFA in or MFA in, that's fine as well. You'll also include that the date that your degree was or will be received. So you don't have to put the range of time for education, but just like when you finished or when you are expecting to finish. And you also don't want to have high school in your education section. Okay, so experience. This is going to be really the biggest, kind of like most weighty part of your resume, because this is where you're basically saying like why you're qualified for the position based on your experience. So you can title experience in a lot of different ways, however you think it works best for you. So that might be a relevant or related experience, work experience, leadership experience, internship experience, volunteer experience, other experience, additional experience. However you think best categorizes your experiences, you can do. It can be pretty flexible. Things that aren't as flexible are within each section. Again, you'll need to be reverse chronological, so the most current first and then older at the bottom. Some of the information that you need for experience is the organization or company that you're working for, its location, city and state, the dates that you worked there, and then also your job title. So we can see in this example under the relevant experience, the Viacom and production assistant, you can also choose to flip those two lines if you wanted to. If you wanted the position to be the first thing that's seen and then the company second, that's totally fine. Just again, make sure that you're doing it the same throughout the document. And then, so a little word about relevant and additional experience. A reason that you might want to split up your experience like that is, say, if you've had an older experience that is more relevant to what you're applying to than, say, your most current experience is. Breaking up into relevant and additional allows you to bring older experiences more toward the top of your resume. So that can be a really good tool, especially, again, if you have like older experiences that are more relevant than whatever your more current experiences are. And then the most important part of the experience is those bullet points when you describe what you did in the position. And this is a really good way, especially if maybe the job titles that you've had don't seem super relevant to what you're applying to. It's all in the way that you describe what you did that makes it relevant, can make it relevant to what you're applying to. And in those bullet points, you want to aim for like 2 to 5 bullets per each experience entry, is just a good rule of thumb. And in those bullets, there is kind of a formula that you follow usually to write them. And that is starting with an action verb and then what you did or a certain task, and then also a little detail about how you did it or why you did it or like accomplishments or results that came of your actions. That's a way to write a really good, strong, flushed out bullet point. And it goes beyond the step of just like describing a job, but really kind of talking about your personal accomplishments is important and shows the value that you can bring to a company that you're applying to. And with this little image here, the 20 powerful resume words, that's just a reminder that you do want to try to use different verbs for each bullet point. You want to try to avoid saying the same verb over and over again, just to really showcase your different skills a lot better. Okay, and then another section that is very common is to have a skill section. And this one, the biggest thing to remember is the separation of hard and soft skills. And in the skills section, you only want to include hard skills. You won't label it hard skills, it'll still just be labeled skills, but the things that you're listing are going to be hard skills. So that's like pretty much anything related to computers, software, any languages, even sometimes like equipment or certain technology. Those are good things to be listing in your skills section. Your other skills, the more soft skills like communication, teamwork, time management, they're all still very important and you definitely want to have them on your resume, but they just won't be listed in the skills section. So they're really good to incorporate in the cover letter where you can kind of expand on them and show examples, or even trying to like weave them into your bullet points when you describe your work is a better strategy than including it in the skill section. And the reason for that is that soft skills are much more subjective. So I might think that I'm very great at communicating, but maybe other people who have worked with me actually wouldn't say that about me. And they're really kind of things that you prove over time in a position. So that's the reason that you don't really include them in the skills section because, again, yeah, it's very subjective. Whereas like listing that I know Microsoft Excel in my skills section, that's, you know, a yes or no. Whereas those soft skills, again, are more subjective and kind of up to people's perception. So that's about skills. And then another section in your resume that you might have could be affiliations or memberships. And this could be like student organizations that you're part of or professional organizations. And you don't really write that information, write that much information in this section. It's just going to be the organization, its location or chapter, and then also your position, or if you were just a member, and then the dates that you were involved with them. Another section you might have is honors and awards. So this, very similar to memberships, you don't have to expand that much on it. You can just name the award and then the awarding organization and then the date that you received it. Excuse me. But if you do want to expand on this, like say the name of the award, it doesn't really explain like what the award was for. You can have kind of like a little sub bullet where you very briefly describe what it is. That's okay too. Just make sure that it still kind of like follows the formatting and fits in nicely. Yeah. And then the last section that I'm going to go through that you might include, course projects. This is going to be formatted very similarly to an experience entry because it is an experience. You're just categorizing it differently. So you can see in this example that it's, again, very similar to a regular experience entry. You just might, instead of like a position, you might say the project title and then like the course instead of the company. But you'll list like the dates in the same way that you worked on it. And then you'll write about your experiences and the bullet points in the same way. So using the same like verb, task, detail format, aiming to have like 2 to 5 bullet points for each project. So that's all the same. Any questions, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering about, so you mentioned about using your CalArts email. Is that like the right one to use when applying to jobs, or is it sort of showing that you're just like out of college? Like, should I set up you know what I mean, another email address with just my name?
Yeah, so it's up to you. It's really about whatever you check the most regularly. Yeah, having, I mean, especially with your email, it being like alum.calarts, like if for myself, when I first saw that, I thought that everyone that had that email was an alum. So yeah, it might be outside people might perceive it that way as well. So yeah, it's totally fine to have your student email, but also if you prefer having just like a Gmail or a different format, like that's fine as well. It's just really about what you check the most, and then also that it does look professional.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, so I will move on now to cover letters. And if any questions come up again, even from earlier content, that's totally fine. Just hold on to them. Okay, so for cover letters, a cover letter is essentially, it's just a letter of introduction. You can think of it as a document that's introducing yourself when you're not there to introduce yourself in person. So if it's appropriate for the position you're applying to, you can even kind of show some humor or like personality if that's something that is you feel would be good to show for a position. But it's also totally fine if it's a very pretty like formal kind of like business style letter. That's totally fine as well. So that something that a cover letter does is it helps the employer clarify or interpret some of the things that are on your resume and really provides context. So where the resume is just you like list an experience and you say basically I did this, this, this. The cover letter provides more context and can kind of tell a story in a way, especially if maybe your experiences aren't all super directly related to what you're applying to. The cover letter is a really good place to even potentially kind of explain like your career path very briefly, and then also really highlight your skills and experiences that are transferable to whatever you're applying to. So the two main goals or things that you want to accomplish with the cover letter is firstly highlighting your experiences and skills that show that you're qualified for this particular position that you're applying to. And then also saying why you're interested in the company and the position. So those are the two main goals for the cover letter. And just some do's and don'ts for a cover letter. So your cover letter should visually match your resume. So if you do incorporate some kind of like design and color on your resume, try to incorporate that in your cover letter as well. Things like using the same font style, your header especially, you just want to copy and paste that from the resume onto the cover letter. And the cover letter is brief and authentic, usually about 1 page only. But for some industries and for some kind of maybe like higher levels of positions, you can kind of spill over onto a second page. That's totally fine. But definitely for most entry-level positions, you want to just be aiming for a 1-page cover letter. The cover letter, it should motivate the employer to want to invite you to an interview by explaining what skills you have to offer them, and then also what motivates you to work for them. So why are you interested again? The cover letter should not state exactly what's written in your resume already. It should not be too general. Really, cover letters, more so than resumes, should be very tailored to the position you're applying to. And then also, of course, as with any other sort of form of writing, it should not be a copy of any outside sources. So some formatting for the cover letter. Again, you wanted to match your resume, so use the same header, so your name and contact information, just copy and paste that onto the cover letter. Again, matching the font style and then aiming for 11 to 12 size font. These margins will usually stay 1 inch, unless you're really trying to squeeze in like a few more lines or something, you can make 1/2 inch margins. And for this, all text is going to be left justified or left aligned. So here's an example. This person's name and contact information is the same as their resume. And then you can see that each paragraph, there are no indents. It's just all against the left margin. And then there's a line of space between the paragraphs to show that separation. And then, so these are the sections that go into the cover letter. So again, having that header at the top, and then the date that you're submitting the letter or application, then followed by the employer's name and title, and then the company's name and address, and then your salutation, so dear so-and-so. And then the body of the cover letter is going to be a short opening paragraph, and then 1 to 2 body paragraphs, and then another short closing, and then a sign off. Sincerely, your name, best your name, whatever, however you want to sign off. So now, again, I'm going to go into each of these sections pretty in detail and talk about what you want to include in them. So the opening, you really just want to be very briefly establishing your interest. So you'll want to include the title, the position, the company that you're applying to. If you can say also where you found the position. Some, especially like larger companies, their HR, when they receive these, they want to know like where their positions are being seen. So you could literally say like this position that I saw on LinkedIn or on Indeed, just so they know that. And then also in the opening paragraph, if you can name drop, like if someone, especially if someone recommended for you to apply to the position, or you know someone that worked there, or someone, yeah, kind of on the inside, anyone you know on the inside, if you have that, it's good to name them in this opening paragraph. Very briefly, you'll say who you are, which is usually just saying that you're a student or a recent alum or alum of California Institute of the Arts, and you studied whatever. And then you'll want to preview the main qualifications that you're going to talk about in your body paragraph. And then for those body paragraphs, there's usually 1 to 2 of them based on like how much you're writing. And what you want to do in these paragraphs is really highlight your key strengths, like whatever a job description says, they're always going to mention, like we want someone who's a team player, like who takes leadership, takes initiative, like whatever, all these things that they're asking for. You'll want to highlight those in your letter, and basically say how you have them, and kind of like showcase how you use those before. You're going to point to experiences or transferable skills that relate to the position, again, based on what's mentioned in the job description. You're elaborating on points listed in your resume, providing that context. Again, incorporating keywords from the job description, and you're trying to really make a connection between you and them, being like the company, or like the department or position. You just want to really say something specific about the company or the position to show that you've done research, and also because that really shows that how invested you are in really wanting this position. So in those body paragraphs, some things to consider, things that you want to ask yourself, make sure that you did. Ask yourself if you've provided specific examples as evidence of the skills that you're claiming to have. So for example, if a position is saying that they want someone who takes initiative, in your cover letter, you might, beyond just saying that you're someone who often takes initiative, it's much stronger if you provide then a little like anecdote or a little story to use as, again, evidence sort of that skill that you're saying that you have. You want to ask yourself also what excites you about the company that you're applying to. Do you share their values? Are you aware of special opportunities or projects that they have? Do they like the maybe department you're applying to? Do you know if they get the opportunity to work with like these other people that you're very interested in working with? Anything, again, that's very specific about the company is really, really good to point out, and again, show that you've done your research and that you're very invested in this. You also want to ask yourself why you're interested in this specific position, and also try to like very briefly mention that as well. And then finally, the closing paragraph of the cover letter, essentially you're just saying thank you. Again, this is a very brief paragraph, like the opening one, it might just be 2 to 3 sentences. And you're gonna just very briefly recap what you have to offer, like 2 or 3 of the main points that you made throughout the letter. You're also going to offer for the employer to contact you and kind of give them like a call to action to invite you to an interview, or saying that you really look forward to further expanding on your qualifications in an interview, something like that, a little call to action. And then again, just thanking them for their time and consideration. And then you'll have your signature, so it's sincerely, and then your name. If it's an electronic document that you're submitting, don't worry about like trying to physically sign it. You can just type your name, that's totally fine. But if it is something that you're submitting like a hard copy of, a physical paper, you do want to have like sincerely and then a couple lines of blank space for you to physically sign the document, and then also still have your name typed at the bottom. And that's pretty much it for what I have in terms of content for this presentation. Are there any questions about the cover letter, or any questions about the presentation as a whole, or anything? No? Okay, great. Well, if you do think of a question later on, this is my email, njones@calarts. You can send me an email anytime, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And if you want me to look at any resumes or cover letters that you have, I'm very happy to do that. You can just email them to me, and if it's something that requires not too many too many edits, I can just electronically do that and send it to you. But if it's something that we want to talk about more, then I'll just ask that we set up an appointment and we can really dive deep into your application documents.